Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And now for something completely different. This is going to be probably the unique one among these talks, because it's more of a story time kind of deal rather than a very technical one. It's the smart home way to deal with your neighbor. And it's about home automation. So I have a neighbor. I know, shocking, but until very recently, actually, she moved out. Imagine a middle-aged woman from Norway, actually, so she didn't even speak Hungarian. And she's completely a chain smoker. And I don't really like smoke. Sorry, guys. But I just don't like it at all. And whenever I would open the doors in the morning to let some fresh air in, I would have to be like on my toes at all times to when is it coming? Because it was coming. Like, she smoked like a pack a day at least. And I'm like, well, what would a sane person do? And then I abandoned that thought process, and I was like, what would a developer do? So I was like, well, I can install PIR sensors on the door, and like opening, whether it's open or not, essentially. And that would give me something. Like, I at least know when my doors are open and when I need to close one, balcony doors, when I need to close one in the other room, for example. But I would still need to like detect the smoke. Like, that's the more difficult part. And I found some people who have experimented with these smoke sensors, like with an Arduino and things like that. But it seemed like really an over-engineered solution that might not be needed. But I mean, I was ready to go for any option here. But instead, I thought, why not just talk to her? If maybe she could like look over from the other balcony and see if I have a window or a door open, and just text me or something. And she wasn't very keen on that idea. But I had the idea, like, I was already experimenting with home automation at the time, and I knew that there were these wireless buttons that you could like put anywhere, essentially battery powered. And I was like, would you be interested in it if I just gave you one? And I don't think she understood quite what I meant and that I was completely serious. So about a week later, when it arrived, I was like, here, so just push this whenever you come out to smoke. And I think she was too shocked to say anything. So she accepted, and she has been pressing the button like a nice trained little monkey. Sorry, don't mean to imply anything, but that's what happened, and it worked fairly well. Actually, before the talk, I should have taken the stuff out of the bag, but the break was too short, so I forgot. So a short little intermission here. So these are the props, and here's the button. It's about this size. You can take a look after the talk. So she moved out about a month ago, so I'm going to have to find a new solution with the new neighbor. That's the next talk. That's the sequel. So anyway, I did put together the over-engineered solution as well, because we can't stop, I guess, developers. And that's this one. This is a cute little 3D printed box with that exact same smoke detector in it with an Arduino connected. And it monitors air quality. Actually, this is not technically a smoke detector, but an air quality sensor. And what it does is what you would imagine. It basically, again, with the door opening detection, it just sends a signal when it detects smoke. And it's at least faster than I would detect it, inside with my own biological nose, which is, pathetic. So yeah, that's the first part. And what you might be asking is why would someone have a home automation system? This is fine and all, but it seems like a very specific use case. So while I don't have the answer to that question, I can give some more examples which will only make this question even stronger in your head. So for example, I have some lights. above my couch, which normally people do that. But I had this idea. I did the renovations. I installed the fake ceiling myself. Well, not myself, but I had it installed. And I had the idea that what if there was like a reading light at like each spot on the couch that you could turn on one by one, depending on where you were sitting with your book or whatever, ebook. And yeah, like what would it look like on the wall? Like, would you just have 4 switches and then which one is corresponding to which one? So for this one, I guess it's better, and RGB ceilings, obviously. If it's not RGB, why bother? But then you can have something like this on the wall. And I apologize, it's in Hungarian. But essentially, there are these scenes. Those are the big buttons. These correspond to set light configurations. And at the top, there are these reading lights, which you can turn it on one by one. You can also take your phone out, which you usually have on you, and just turn on the one that you're sitting under, and you don't need to get up and do anything. So lighting is a big one. Is usually the first reason why people go to home automation in the first place, because they want to have fancy lights. They want them to turn on automatically. They want them to turn off automatically. For example, if you have a smart TV, these usually can be hooked up to a home automation system pretty easily, and then you just turn it on and the lights turn off magically, and that's pretty cool. So this is the wall panel, but there's also like a web interface. I translated this to English specifically for this. I can zoom in. Yeah. And so you can see the same scenes, I guess, and then you can go into details. You can individually tune the dimmable lights, for example. But there's also roller shutters that you might want to integrate, again, for that cinema feeling of, turning on the TV and having the blinds go down when you're starting a movie. It's pretty cool. Colors, air conditioning, temperature control in general is something that people usually want in their home automation system. And it's an n squared problem. So when you have n devices connected to the system, you can have n squared interactions between them. So the more you add, the more of these sorts of combinations that you can find between them. So for example, if I have a sensor on the door, whether it's open or not, I can, for example, have the blinds go up automatically when I'm opening one. And because I probably want to go out or something to the balcony. Or what you can also do is have these systems query weather data automatically, and also like sun position. We'll get into this more later, but then it can automatically draw your blinds to a preset spot, or you can like calculate where it will optimally have to be. And then like in the summer, you don't want too much sunlight to come in and things like that. So that's, I guess, the overview of my personal system. But there's a lot of different houses, apartments with many different needs of users. And I want to get into the how a little bit. So maybe I piqued your interest a little bit and you want to get into home automation. And first of all, it's not simple. Unfortunately, the industry isn't really there where you can, an average user who isn't maybe a developer that helps a lot, or isn't technically inclined more than the average, it's not that easy to get into, unless you pay a lot of money. What's starting to happen is that there are companies that will install the whole system for you for a lump sum upfront, a couple €1,000, think around that, depending on needs and more importantly the size of the house or apartment. But say you don't want to spend a huge amount of money, and say you do want to do a little DIYing every now and then to hack it together, see what rules you can define yourself, and just have an evolving system as your needs evolve. In this case, I have some good news for you, and I can show some examples of what that might look like. So First of all, you're going to need a hub. A hub is the central computer, essentially, but it can run on a Raspberry Pi, essentially anything that's always on. And there are two main systems. Both of these are open source, OpenHAB, HAB, and Home Assistant. Both of these are open source, as I said, and the great thing about that is that there are so many different manufacturers, so many different protocols for different devices, is that with open source, there's probably someone who's already dealt with that particular protocol. So there's a good chance that you're already going to be able to find a plugin for your particular niche device. So I definitely recommend one of these two. I use OpenHAB, which is Home Automation Bus is what it stands for. Bus in that it takes inputs from certain devices and gives commands to other devices and just ties everything together, which is what you want from a hub. Now the tying it together is the difficult bit. You need to deal with many different kinds of connectivity, connection protocols and technologies with different devices. Many sort of smart devices that you can buy have some sort of an app for it, you know, like that you can control them with, and they would usually connect to Wi-Fi. Thankfully, these, whenever it has an app, it's usually easy to hook into the same interface that the app is already hooking into. So these have easy-to-use plugins for the hubs, as I mentioned. But Wi-Fi is high power consumption, at least relatively speaking. And then the other issue with it is that in large apartment complexes, sometimes range can be very, very limited. And if you want to put it sort of out of the way of the router, you're going to have a bad time. It's going to lose connection a bunch of times, and it's not going to be reliable. So for that, when there's a standard that can be improved somewhat, that's when new standards come in. And then there's a bunch of standards, as you know. So ZWave and Zigbee are the two biggest one from the mesh network category. These are protocols where the devices connect to each other directly, not on the same frequency that Wi-Fi is using. So that means that they're somewhat more reliable in that they don't lose connection. As a trade-off, you throw out the tried and tested network protocols that Wi-Fi is using, TCP and UDP. So they do have a bit more latency from my experience, and they're just a bit more difficult to work with than just, here's the SSID, here's the password, connect to this every time. But these are very low power consumption. So this button, for example, this uses ZWave. It has a little battery in it, and I've been, well, not me, but the neighbor has been using it for the past year and a half, I think, and it's still reporting 70% battery, I think. So it's really low power consumption. You can just stick it on a wall. Like, you don't have to give this to your neighbor. I know, shocking, but you can just stick it in your kitchen wall or somewhere, like where you know you always want to turn on a specific light. You just stick this to a wall and just slap it anytime you want it to do something, which is really cool. So I'm probably going to buy more of these in the future. And there are similar devices that you can just put anywhere and not have to worry about it. And it will tell you when you need to change the battery, but as I said, the order of magnitude is years, not even months. And then the next one is Thread, which doesn't exist. But it's the new standard, which Google is actually backing, so it might actually go anywhere. This would be the best of both worlds, sort of, that uses TCP and UDP and already established network protocols, but also have the same mesh network capabilities and low power consumption that these Z-Wave and Zigbee have. So looking forward to that if that ever happens. And then there's good old-fashioned radio, like motorized blinds, for example, are often radio-powered, radio-controlled, where you just press a button, it zigzags somewhat in the airwaves, and the blinds are like, yep, I'm going down again. So yeah, this particular one is something that's very popular, and I included it specifically because this is where it's really easy to start with home automation. This is a Z-Wave This is something that communicates with ZWave, but you can stick it into your wall behind your existing light switch. And so you can still use your existing light switch to switch a light on and off, but it will also receive messages and will switch them for you. Obviously, don't try this at home, which is weird in this context because where else would you be trying it? But what I mean is that mains power is dangerous and you could get hurt. So be careful or get an electrician to do it for you. Yeah, so say you have all these installed, what next? You can control the lights from your phone. Next up is the fun part, is where you set up the rules. Is that readable? I hope it is. So these are a few simple ones that I mentioned actually when you open the balcony door and it will make the blinds go up. This is OpenHab's DSL, domain-specific language, that you can use to define these rules. So essentially when this item changes to open, which is the door sensor, then send the command to the roller shutter to go up. Simple as it can be. But it can get really complicated. This is a more complicated one. This is what I did for this button. So I don't know how readable it is, but I'll just go over the gist of it. Essentially, when item smoke button receives an update, so if this is pressed, essentially, check if any of the doors are open. If any of them are, then just put a message together with which doors are open, and then do a couple of things. Now this is the good bit. So for example, the smart TVs, as I said, are really good for this kinds of stuff. They essentially have an alert function that if they're on, they will just show a bubble at the top right corner. So if you're watching TV, you will see it like, hey, smoke is incoming, these doors are open, you better run. It will also send a notification to my phone if I'm not watching TV, for example. Telegram is really great for this, by the way. It has similar bot making tools that Slack does. Some of you might be familiar with that, but it doesn't have the workspaces, so it's much better for these one-off things when you just want to have a bot that sends you notifications or messages or whatever, wherever you might be. So that's really cool. And then the other thing, this is my favorite, this controls the LED, the RGB LED in the ceiling that I mentioned earlier. It sets it to red, waits 4 seconds, and then sets it to off, and then waits another 4 seconds and sets it back to what it was. So what that means is that essentially it flashes it red once that, hey, smoke is coming, you better run. So, yeah. Sorry? You really hate smoke. I really do. But this was a fun thing to do anyway. So, and this is what it looks like in action. Again, in Hungarian, I'm sorry, but like you get messages and you can like take a look back. And the nice thing about Telegram is that it also can send queries, like it will show you buttons that you can then press. And the question here was whether you would like another notification, because I actually told the neighbor to press it once when she starts smoking and then press it twice when she stops, so I can know when to reopen the doors. So that will like, you can like present a prompt whether you want that notification, yes or no, and yeah, that works pretty well. Yeah, nearing the end of the talk, one more example that I alluded to this earlier, which is that you can actually have services that you can just activate that will give you the sun position depending on what coordinates you are at. And I didn't know what azimuth meant, so here's a diagram if you're interested. It's essentially where the sun is compared to north, and then there's an elevation which is where the sun is compared to the horizon. And you're like, well, I don't want to calculate that, but it's really cool because you can just view it, and you're like sitting on your couch, sun is in your eye, and you can be like, well, what's that value over there? And you look at it, make a rule that if the sun passes this particular threshold for these values, then send the blinds down to a set position or just down a little bit. And that's really cool, I think. Time? Sort of?
You have 3 more minutes.
Okay. So are there any questions at this point?
How long will it take you to do
as I said, how long did it take me to do it is the question. It's a bit of a work in progress. So I treat it as a hobby because that's what it is. If you treat it as, let's get this done so it will work, then you're going to have a bad time. It's something that always needs tweaking, unfortunately, with things that don't quite work as you want them to. But you can get it to a place where it's pretty good, and then it's more like, what more do I want to add to it? So to actually answer your question, I think I've been doing it for a year or two at this point, and always just adding new things to it. And as I said with the n² stuff, that whenever you add one new thing, you have all this other stuff that's already integrated that you can think about, like, what can I do with this? What rules make sense with these items? Yeah, in connection with these items. So yeah, I guess I'll just run through a couple more. Yeah, so it's very much a DIY thing. And the DIY part can get up until like soldering your own smoke detector and then 3D printing a case for it. And then that's what it will look like. And it's like a really nice thing that you can just put somewhere and it will look nice. Like you won't have wires going everywhere whenever you have guests over or something. And it will be neat and tidy. So yeah, I guess these are just ad lib, I guess. So another thing is the blinds. I mentioned that I have motorized blinds. They have this remote control that's a radio remote control. This was very difficult to integrate because it uses proprietary radio protocol, so I couldn't sniff it and replay it. I tried. So what I ended up doing is that I disassembled the remote, and I'm like, if I can press the buttons with my finger, I can have an Arduino pressing them for me. So here's the Arduino, and it's just one transistor, which can just close the circuit, and I put it in between the buttons. And then what's nice is that the remote uses 3 volts from a battery, and then the Arduino also uses 3 volts only from USB. It converts 5 volts, obviously. So I could just take the battery out and power it directly. And the Arduino will listen on Wi-Fi and listen for messages. And I just send it messages with the interface on the website, on the phone, or voice commands, or whatever. That's the best part. Or whatever, like whatever you can think of, you can then control the blinds. So yeah, this is what it looks like. It lives in that little box. And yeah, there's a couple more, but this is the backup button. It's in a little electric closet. If the system goes down, I still want to be able to see something, which is, yeah. And that's all that I had. So thank you very much.